Hello YouTubers, my name is Frederick Lopez and here is an all-new My Favorite segment. Originally I was going to go over the X-Men films, but before I do that, in honor of Alien Covenant, I thought I would briefly go over my top 10 personal favorite Ridley Scott films. Now I'm not going to go in-depth or give too many spoilers away, but this is going to be my personal list, so if you disagree, feel free in the comments to let me know your list, if there's films I missed, or some of yours that you think are better. Now, this list isn't going to be exactly which film is better made. This is more of a personal list that I have of Ridley Scott. So pretty much it's films that I enjoy the most, even though some may be better than others. So yeah, before I go on, feel free to let me know your top 10 list in the comments below and let me know your favorite Ridley Scott films. Some honorable mentions are Prometheus, Hannibal, as well as Legend, Robin Hood, and Matchstick Men. Number 10. I really love a film called The Goodyear. Now, The Goodyear has Russell Crowe, it also stars Marion Cotillard, and it pretty much involves an investment broker, and his uncle passes away. He inherits his vineyard, and upon the movie, he remembers his childhood growing up with his uncle. Meanwhile, there's also a long-lost, distant cousin of his that inherits the house. So it's really about this man reliving his childhood memories and really pondering his current state of life. And it's a very, very kind of like, down-to-earth drama. It's not science fiction, it's not action-packed, it's very much a human story. In a way, it's pretty much an independent art house film. And I really love it. It's really Russell Crowe's performance and Ridley Scott's direction that really brings a level of heart to it. And Ridley Scott, his films have great cinematography, and this is just a really heartfelt story. It's kind of like the feeling of like A Walk in the Clouds or some other films. Just basically an independent movie that's really just a human story. Nothing too superficial, nothing too fictional. It's pretty much about this one character and the set of events in his life. And it's very, very low-key compared to those other films, but I really highly enjoy watching it. Number 9 on my list is Black Hawk Down, starring Josh Hartnett. This came out in 2002, and it pretty much takes place in 1993, and it's about the Black Hawk helicopters going down in Somalia. And this is an intense modern war film. I remember when it first came out, it was so visceral and real. It's pretty much like the same feeling as Saving Private Ryan, but you're in the 90s instead of in World War II. And it's pretty much about these men struggling to maintain control around all this chaos. And I just like it. It's not too... It has this sort of style that his brother Tony Scott had towards films. But really, this is more, again, real. But you have the action. Everything feels intense. You feel like you're actually there with the characters when Black Hawk is down. And I really like it. It's one of my favorite films of the 2000s. And a very underrated Ridley Scott film at that. Number 8 is a very underrated film starring Michael Douglas and Andy Garcia. It has to probably include one of my favorite Michael Douglas performances besides Falling Down. Not very well known as much as his other films like Wall Street, but that is Ridley Scott's Black Rain. I like this. It involves 2 undercover cops, and they pretty much arrest a member of the Yakuza. And upon arresting him, they end up getting deeper and deeper into the Japanese criminal underworld. And then there's also certain revelations learned about the police officers. So you really get some good performances from Michael Douglas and Andy Garcia. And again, it has that 80s action movie vibe. Something about it is very stylized. I like it. It's pretty much like his stylization on Blade Runner, but it's not very futuristic. It's set in the 80s, a present day at the time. But I like it. It's a very different role for Michael Douglas and a very different movie for Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott's just so visceral and just has a level of versatility to his work, ranging from many genres and styles. Number 7 over Black Rain would be Thelma and Louise. Terrific performances by Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis. One of the best films of the 90s. And yeah, it's pretty much a waitress and a housewife who are friends to decide to get away from their boring lives and go on a road trip. Meanwhile, this guy tries to rape one of them and he gets shot, and because of that, they basically become fugitives. They run from the law, and stakes really, really escalate very fast. You also have a very early role with Brad Pitt, and it has a lot of themes of abuse and just all around It has themes of abuse and just the politics of women, and it's really a very endearing tale with two female leads. And Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon really bring Thelma and Louise alive. The writing's great, and Ridley Scott's direction, again, very different from his other work. But I think it's almost like Goodyear, where it's a very heartfelt story. It's really about the two characters of Thelma and Louise carrying it until the very end. So, if you haven't seen Thelma and Louise, I would highly recommend it. It's one of Ridley Scott's best films and very different from his other work. But I really like the tale of it and having two female protagonists and just dealing with the politics of being a female as well as just the current state of their lives again, being a housewife and a waitress and wanting something more. And there's some great themes there. Number 6 on my list would probably be The Martian. I really love this movie. It stars Matt Damon and pretty much it's castaway in space. He's on a mission. They're on a mission to Mars. There's a storm. They must get out, and he's left behind on Mars. And the crew thinks he's dead, and they don't know he's alive till they're back on Earth. So it's pretty much him struggling to stay alive until his crew gets to him. Maybe, maybe not. They go against orders, and he's pretty much left there to die. But it really shows his wits and brains as a scientist in order to keep himself alive. And much like Ridley Scott, Matt Damon is a very versatile actor. He lost some weight for this. They CGI some weight off of him, but he gives a very, very endearing performance. And much like Tom Hanks in Castaway, it's really a one-man show. And what aids this is Ridley Scott's visuals on Mars, bringing this out, making you feel like it's real, but bringing the novel story screenplay out with Matt Damon's performance. All around, it's a very, very great film by Ridley Scott and one of his best in many years, probably one of the best films of the decade. Earned a nomination for Matt Damon for Best Actor, but it's a very, very good film. For some reason, the Golden Globes thought it was a comedy. Yeah, I don't know, but it's a very good drama directed by Ridley Scott with a terrific performance by Matt Damon. You also have Jessica Chastain in the film. And the visuals are amazing. And again, Ridley Scott shoots science fiction unlike any other filmmaker I have seen. And it is among one of his best films. Number 5 on my list is another science fiction film he's well known for is Alien. I really love Alien. It's a suspense science fiction horror film. You just have great performances, and one thing I do love about this film is that they had a B movie in mind, and it was really Ridley Scott's direction along with H.R. Giger's work with the art direction that really treated a B story as A material. He really treated it with the characters, made you want to feel like it was real, that you were really with these people like space truckers. And I really like it for that. His direction really elevated the material to become a science fiction classic. And Alien is just that perfect blend of horror and science fiction built in with reality, grounding it to the characters and this certain situation of them on this ship with this creature. And it's a very slow movie at the beginning, but it builds up and builds up until the very end. And because of his direction with the designs and the editing and the way it's shot, it feels very much like a gritty, real space opera. It's almost like there's Star Wars and here's the dark side of it with Alien. And they did that very well. I liked his choices of not showing the alien fully. Besides certain problems they had with the suit, everything he did in that film is just a work of art, and it is a science fiction masterpiece. Number 4 on my list is another science fiction film by Ridley Scott that I actually like more than Alien and Martian, and that is Blade Runner. Any cut of the movie. The final cut's good, but there's so many cuts of the film, but yeah, it pretty much has Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer, Sean Young, Edward James Olmos. Blade Runner is just a spectacle of the 80s. Again, one of those movies that's from the 80s, much like the 70s, 80s films, that really looks a lot more ahead of its time than it actually is. It looks like it's past the 1980s. And that is because you have futuristic things, but there's a certain way he shoots that makes it seem larger than life, yet grounded and real, tangible. It's basically a science fiction film noir the way it's shot. I love it. And ultimately it has a very engaging story about humans and replicants. Harrison Ford is pretty much like this detective, and it's pretty much his story as a detective, and I really, really love it. It's a very underrated film. It's getting a sequel called Blade Runner 2049 later this year, and if you have not seen Blade Runner, any cut, I highly recommend it. If you like film noirs, if you like Ridley Scott films, science fiction, Harrison Ford, just whatever, it's a very, very different film, and ultimately I've never seen another film quite like it. Blade Runner is something of its own. Number 3 on my list is Gladiator, starring Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah, Gladiator is just amazing. Sure, much like Kingdom of Heaven, Gladiator has some historical inconsistencies. It's not exactly historically accurate, but that said, it is an epic movie. Hans Zimmer's score, Maximus, Russell Crowe's Maximus, is like father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. I'm paraphrasing. I may have gotten it wrong, but it's just an epic movie. He's basically in the Roman Empire as a general. After a battle, he goes back to his family. They get slaughtered, and he basically becomes a slave. It's pretty much like Spartacus. He's a gladiator, and Joaquin Phoenix is the emperor. He killed his father. And it's pretty much about a gladiator defining an empire. Such a terrific movie. Great fight scenes in the Gladiator Coliseum, the battles, everything is just an old-fashioned epic. If you like films like Braveheart, Lawrence of Arabia, Ben-Hur, you're going to love Gladiator. Gladiator is amazing, and it is one of Ridley Scott's best films. One of my favorite films by Ridley Scott. Even with the historical inaccuracies, I still enjoy it, and it is just a thrill ride. It's a long movie, but it's one of those long movies that doesn't feel as long as it is. It feels much shorter because you're so invested in the characters and music, and just everything about it's just epic. Number 2 on my list is yet another film directed by Ridley Scott, starring Russell Crowe, but it also stars Denzel Washington, and that is American Gangster. I really love crime films, and this movie is awesome. I like the theatrical version, but I really like the director's cut even more with the added scenes. It slows it down a bit, but you do get that extra ending with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe talking to one another when he gets out of prison. Ultimately, if you like any other crime film, you would really love this. It's a little bit more hardcore as far as sex, violence, and everything, but it still is pretty good. It's pretty much about like this American gangster, Denzel Washington. It's the 1970s. His boss dies. He decides to rise in power. And during this, you have the Vietnam War, and he goes to Vietnam and pretty much gets like heroin. It's with the Golden Triangle, so he's importing drugs. And it's pretty much about like his rise and decline as an American gangster. You also have Josh Brolin in the film. It is an awesome movie. If you love crime films, there's a great scene between Denzel Washington and Idris Elba that is just amazing. I won't spoil it, but if you haven't seen American Gangster, I would highly recommend it. To me, it is one of my favorite Ridley Scott films, and I really love crime movies. It's one of my favorite crime films. Number 1 on my list is Kingdom of Heaven, both the theatrical and the extended director's cut. The extended director's cut is a work of art. A superb masterpiece. Stars Orlando Bloom, Eva Green, Liam Neeson, Jeremy Irons. I mean, the list just goes on. It is a fantastic movie. A little bit inaccurate to the real story, but it's ultimately about Orlando Bloom, after the death of his wife, finding out that he's an heir to this king. He becomes kind of like a king. Royalty. Anyway, it pretty much involves the Crusades and how they got started, and it is an epic movie. I mean, this is like after Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean. This is right after Troy. Orlando Bloom's in another epic. It's just like that kind of like 2000s resurgence of epic movies. Big battles. This is done spectacularly. I mean, Ridley Scott just knows how to shoot stuff in such a visceral way. You saw similar cinematography like this in Exodus, the Moses story, but really Kingdom of Heaven is a far better film, and a lot of it's a mixture of CGI with practical effects, and just the scope of this again is epic. It's even bigger than Gladiator, and there's many other films that are better in Ridley Scott's filmography, but for me personally, I enjoy Kingdom of Heaven. It's my favorite. I rewatch it over and over again, and to me, it's just my favorite. I just can't help it. I mean, I even have the Blu-ray, and I just watch this movie like over and over. I mean, it's just the score, the performances, the ultimate tale of tragedy and just like epic fighting, along with Ridley Scott's directorial style, and there's just the cinematography. Just everything about this movie is just epic, pure and simple. That is my favorite Ridley Scott film, and I really, really am looking forward to see how Alien Covenant will be. Anyway, I hope that was quick. I just went through these films really quick, as fast as I could, just to present my personal top 10 favorite Ridley Scott films. Again, if there is a film I did not mention or that you thought should be higher, again, let me know your list down below. I would like to hear your list down below. I know people are going to have different opinions, but I just wanted to share my personal list. Ridley Scott is such a talented filmmaker. Yeah. Again, let me know your list down below. If you like this video, click the like button, comment, subscribe. Check out my other videos. I have other Alien reviews and my favorite Alien franchise film. So yeah. And then be on the lookout for my upcoming review of Alien Covenant. Because in space, no one can hear you scream. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and go watch a Ridley Scott film.